The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Mark Bound and Dr. Scott Gershwer, your favorites and mine. Today we will be answering listener emails, and we have a question from Stephen, who lives in Detroit, Michigan. And Stephen asks, Trump's rambling speech at the UN was a national embarrassment. He basically called out every other country as a disaster. He did nothing but complain about open borders, teleprompters, and Biden. What do you all think will be the global fallout from this disastrous speech? And Trump said NATO should give Ukraine what it needs to defeat Russia. Do you think he meant it? Finally, Poland has warned Russia about invading their airspace. They promised to take action and shoot down anything flying over their country that is unauthorized. Are they serious? Could this be a prelude to a larger conflict? Yes, I also wondered that whether what Trump said about giving Ukraine what they need will last, or whether it'll just last until Putin comes and butters Trump up and is the last person to talk to Trump, and then Trump will reverse himself yet again. Anyway, so
can I start with this one?
Absolutely.
Because I have a little New York perspective on this. New York City. Trump was apparently still butthurt over the fact that the UN didn't give him the job to do the renovations. And that was a major theme yesterday. My understanding is that the reason that the UN didn't award that contract to Trump was because of his many mob ties. And they didn't think it was seemly at that point to have Trump be the person to do the work on that. Furthermore, he seemed to be a little offended that the escalator stopped working, although as it turns out, somebody from the president's party ran ahead and inadvertently triggered the stop mechanism on the escalator. So it was his own forward guy's fault for doing that.
That's what happened.
That's okay. And here's the thing. They were 4 steps up, and there was an escalator right next to them that was also going up. They could have just gone down the escalator 2 steps, went to the next escalator and rode the escalator up in Trumpian style, triumphantly rising into the chamber. And then of course he had the problem with the teleprompter, which was run by somebody from the White House, because it was the White House teleprompter and not the UN teleprompter. And they were running the teleprompter and it got broke. Maybe it was the same one that Bill Clinton tried to use, and he gave basically a word for word rendition of the speech without looking at notes and without a teleprompter. Back in the day, Clinton did in 1993 when he spoke somewhere. I don't remember where it was, if it was at the UN or elsewhere. But because I think they didn't get the teleprompter back on for quite some time during the speech, and I watched the whole thing. It was a shit show from the get-go. He just kept complaining. Like, he just went like off the top of his head, stuff that's bothering me. Your countries are all going to hell, which is a hell of a thing to say.
America's the greatest under me. And
yeah. Like,
I'm not bragging, but
I was glad. I was glad to see that he settled on 7 wars that he fixed, because last weekend it was 10. He had gotten up to 10, and now he dropped back down to 7. So 7 seems to be a more reasonable number than 10, but it's hard to prove either way. And he just came across as an insane person, and they didn't laugh because I don't think it's funny anymore, which I thought was really telling. Because if you remember, in the first Trump administration, he was bragging and bragging and bragging, and people just started busting out laughing, and he caught it, and he said, "Wow, I didn't expect that kind of reaction." But he didn't realize what a clown he was being. But now he's kind of like the danger clown. He's the clown you don't want to let your kids get too close to.
Yeah, he's Stephen King's It.
Yeah.
Down in his drainage
right.
system.
he's a dangerous clown now, and the world's not amused. And I don't think there's any fallout from it. When he said that NATO should, by all means, give Ukraine the weapons that they need, he was divorcing himself from it. That's NATO, not the U.S. He doesn't seem to want to participate. He said later on, by the way, it wasn't in that speech, but in a Q&A later, that he thought that they should shoot down any Russian jets that fly over into NATO territory, which is a dangerous escalation. And then when asked whether he would back up the country that does the shooting down and respect the pledge to NATO, Article 5, he said it depends on the circumstances, so he wouldn't even go there. So it was a very Taco sort of moment there, where he's like, in one minute he's railing and grievances and all kinds of stuff, and then the next he's trying to play tough guy, but then he seemed a little sad that his good buddy Putin didn't do what he wanted him to do. And it just shows that he doesn't understand, and he doesn't understand diplomacy. He doesn't understand global affairs. He doesn't understand anything. People don't have friends in foreign relations. This is like the stuff that Lord Palmerston started, and some real tough guys back in the day. What's his name from Napoleon's guy? Mark, refresh my memory, please. Napoleon's realpolitik guy, and guys like Henry Kissinger, who would, just as soon as carpet bomb you, then be your best friend. It is shocking. It really is. It's shocking that he thinks that this stuff is personal, and that you can be a glad hander, and you can shake hands with people and clap them on the back, and that means they're on your side. Man, this is global affairs. This is not a pillow fight. This is serious.
Thought his speech went over well.
Oh, what a joke!
That really, really bothered me.
All right. No, that's all. I'll let everybody else talk.
Well, no, I mean, Scott, everything you said is right. I'm sure that the people of the United Nations kind of hope that he didn't make it up the escalator when it stopped. He also complained about and get this. This is a world leader. He also complained about the mayor of London. What? I don't even know what to even say about that. That would be like Putin coming here and complaining about the mayor of New York City. I mean, that's not in their purview. And, you're right. They aren't laughing anymore. They aren't laughing anymore like they did before, because then he was back then he was just a buffoon. But now they're understanding that he's a dangerous buffoon. He could be a very dangerous buffoon, and they're getting the message now. If I suggest you check out James O'Brien, LBC, had a pretty good thing about the Trump speech, basically saying that every patriotic Brit should be insulted by it. And yeah, it was an absolute, as Scott says, a shit show. And it went an hour and 15 minutes. He's allowed 15 minutes, but it went an hour and 15 minutes. And Jesse Waters, I think it was today or yesterday afterwards, when said that, you know what, if the UN doesn't like it, we should bomb them. But no.
The UN building is in New York City.
So yeah, well, that's beside the point. That's logistics. We don't care about that. I mean, it's those kind of offhanded comments. Like Killamede saying we should non-voluntary lethal injections for homeless people. I'm sorry, these are the exact same rhetoric that supposedly the radical left is violent. Now these are two talking heads that you like a lot, but they could say this kind of stuff. Him saying that, and I agree with Scott. He was very specific. NATO should give Ukraine what they need. He's still hedging his bets. Because Scott's made a very good point in the past, many times on this show, that Trump looks at this, who can win? I'm going to back whoever's win. Trump's the guy that, he goes to Belmont Stakes, the horses start running, he's got a ticket in his hand, and they're coming down the last furlong, and he runs in, he changes his ticket to get the horse that's in front. That's his attitude. That is his attitude toward all this. And so, yeah, it was kind of an interesting comment. I do think that Poland, and I loved the ambassador from Poland. If you haven't had the opportunity, check it out, during the Security Council, basically saying, so if by accident, and he was kind of hinting that maybe that accident thing was bullshit, was to come over, we will shoot you down. Don't come in here and cry about it, Russia. You've been warned. I mean, and the language for the United Nations Security Council was pretty strong when we think about diplomacy. Usually they're not quite that transparently obvious, but the Polish ambassador was extremely obvious. And the other one to check out is the Finnish ambassador, the guy from Finland. He was speaking for all the Nordic countries. He was speaking for Sweden. He was speaking for Norway. He was speaking, for those countries, and he had some strong language for the Russians. So I think that's a positive. Are they serious? I believe they are, Stephen. I think they're serious, because when they start using this kind of escalated language at the diplomatic level, that means something. They're not pussyfooting around with this. I think that's an important thing that we have to understand. So, yes, I think they're serious. Could this be a prelude to a larger conflict? Could very well be, unfortunately. But what's your options?
Yeah.
Your options are, let them come in and take Poland, let them take Finland, let them take, there has to be a pushback here. And we're starting to hear from the diplomats, those people that normally don't commit to anything. Yep. And everything is kind of, under the surface. You got to kind of, just kind of translate it a little bit with, diplomat speak. These guys are being very, very open and honest about it. And I think that, this, if I was Russia, I'd pay attention, because you're not doing real well in Ukraine. You're really going to you're going to hate fighting the Poles, and you sure as hell don't want to fight the Finns. You know what they've done to you. And then you add the Germans. So United States, probably not that important at this point in time.
Yeah, and the Russian economy is not doing well. I agree with Mark. Russia's going to push, and it seems to me that for the Russia to fly their jets, their MiGs, over Poland for 12 minutes. And that may very well have been a dig to, I don't know if it was to humiliate Trump or to make a point, because Trump had said, well, it was an accident, the drones or whatever, and piloting aircraft and flying around for 12 minutes is certainly not a mistake. That simply shows blatant disregard. Putin will push, and he will push, and he will push. So you either let him push and push and keep going, or you start shooting down airplanes. So yes, escalation is quite possible, and escalation is quite possible, and I think very likely by doing nothing.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think doing nothing is worse.
I mean, you have to look at these moves by Russia as a kind of a form of communication. They're not talking, but they're doing stuff and they're doing it on purpose that they're expecting a reaction to, and they're going to judge what that reaction is, and they're going to move from there. And so I think it's really important that you get together, you huddle for a bit, and you figure out what you want to do and how you want to respond. You don't shoot off the top of your head, and you don't make mistakes. And that's what real world leaders do, right? It's how we got through the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's how Europe hung together for as long as it did, with all the fighting that they had to do. You learn how to speak the language of warfare and diplomacy and realpolitik, and you make sure that you do it the right way, and you're not being frivolous about it. And that is the last thing you would expect from a Donald Trump, because he's completely reactive. He doesn't think things through, and he doesn't know what he's doing. The guy that I was thinking about before was Talleyrand.
Yes.
Right, Charles Mills, who was the foreign minister, I think, for both the French monarchy, the French Revolution, the Directory, Napoleon, and the restored Bourbon monarchy, and he survived all of them.
All of that, yeah.
all of that, right, without getting his head cut off, and did a great deal of balancing and prioritizing state security over any other concern. A real practitioner. The term didn't exist then, but a real practitioner of highly pragmatic politics that is unemotional, which Donald Trump is more emotional than anybody I've ever met. And, when you think about the Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump thing and charges that women are more emotional than men are, boy, does Trump fly in the face of that, because he'll do things based on emotion and impulse and things like that without thinking them through in a way that I don't think Hillary Clinton ever would have. And then just using any means necessary and justifying it by the end as part of politics. And that is Putin. Putin is a real practitioner, and Donald Trump is not. And hopefully there are other people involved in NATO who are more attuned with this kind of diplomacy, because this is real high stakes stuff that we're entering into now. And I think that it's really important.
And it is important, and we have to remember. And I'm reminded of a paper I wrote many years ago. This is not the first time. In 2015, Turkey shot down a Russian warplane that had ventured into its airspace. It had been warned numerous times. One of the pilots was killed. NATO said, we respect that Turkey should be able to do this to protect their airspace, their sovereignty. And of course, Putin called it a stab in the back, and that there were going to be significant consequences, and none ever came. None ever came, because the rest of NATO got behind them and said, hey, we got your back. Yes, this is something to do. So, this is not, Stephen, something that is new. It's not like it's never happened, but it did a little over 10 years, almost 10 years ago, because this was on November 24th of 2015, where the Turks basically shot one down, and Putin complained about it. And, the rest of NATO rallied around Turkey because they were a member of NATO. And basically, it was Putin did a taco. He made some threats, but nothing ever came of it. And that was during the Syrian civil war. That's why I wrote about this, because there is a paper out there where I wrote about the Syrian civil war that was going on, and the actors that were involved into it. And this incident came up. Because this was in the half century that NATO had existed, no NATO country had ever shot down anything from Russia. So this is a big deal, and yeah, this could escalate. And if it escalates, I think the people that really have to be really concerned are the Russians. I mean, you got your hands full with just the Ukrainians. Can you imagine? Again, I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
but you pile on the Poles and the Germans and the Finns and the
right. But is it going to be conventional warfare?
That would be a question.
That becomes the big question. And again, as you point out, I had forgotten about this incident, but now I remember it. Now you've jogged my memory. And Barack Obama was president then, and people used to talk about Barack Obama like he was some kind of weakling and he wore mama's jeans or whatever it was called. And Barack Obama had Putin's number. He can glare down at Putin in a way that made Putin understand that he was the inferior party there, in a way that Trump never can. And Trump's bootlicking, to be polite about it, has really emboldened Putin and put him on a higher plane than any Russian leader has been probably since Stalin. And it's just all wrong. Trump's approach to Putin has been all wrong from the beginning. He's an appeaser. He's a bootlicker. He offends our allies and embraces our enemies, and he's done everything wrong. And Lord help us if those chickens come home to roost, because I don't think it'll be a conventional war for long. Because as you say, Mark, I agree totally. NATO will wipe the floor with Putin and put him in a corner, and that's the worst place to put a Putin in the corner.
Yeah. And Scott, you make a great point about optics. I remember that picture of Obama standing there in front of Putin and basically glaring down at him, and how small Putin looked next to Obama, who was a fairly tall man. I believe Trump is a little taller, but when you see Trump and Putin together, they look about the same size. It's just that optics that you get from it, and that sense. And you're right. Everybody said, Obama wears mom jeans and does this and wore a tan suit. God forbid. Did all these terrible. But yeah, Obama did. I agree with you. Obama had Putin's number, and you've said this numerous times, Scott, and I totally agree. Hillary Clinton had Putin's number. And I think that's why that they interfered, because he was more afraid of Clinton than he was anybody else, and Trump he really didn't care about. But
sorry, just to break in, apparently we, the United States, or the government, has stopped interdicting Russian incoming cyberware, whatever it is. I mean, there used to be people in the government, I don't know, scanning for malware from Russia, scanning for bots, scanning for this, scanning for that, checking for, incursory software, invading software. Apparently that has stopped.
Oh, we've stopped doing it. We've stopped looking for it.
Yes.
Anyway.
So that I was just talking about weak and allowing the, opening the door for the horse to get out, or the whatever to get out of the holding pen. We've allowed that to happen. Yeah.
And the incident in 2015 really showed. I think it was an F-15 that the Syrians were using, and the Russians it was an Su-24. It shows the inferiority of some of the material for war that Russia has. And I think by just what's been going on in Ukraine with the Russian-Ukraine conflict, we've shown the inferiority of the Russian army and the Russian materials that they're using, conduct this war. And again, like I said, me and Scott are totally on the same page. NATO would absolutely wipe the floor with them. Absolutely. And I don't think the Chinese would come to their rescue. People are saying, oh, maybe the Chinese. I truly cannot see the Chinese. They're more interested in economy than they are anything else. They'll back him to a point. But I think if push comes to shove, I think old Vlad will have to rely on the North Koreans, and we've seen how effective they've been so far as cannon fodder. But I truly don't. I mean, I heard somebody was saying, well, though, the Chinese could step in. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it
either. I agree with you.
You don't bite the hand that feeds you. And the rest of the world buys an awful lot of stuff from China, and their economy, that's where they're a superpower, if we want to still use that term. Now, they may be interested in Taiwan. They're definitely interested in that. They're definitely interested in seeing the Japanese come more on board with their sphere of influence and all that, but they are economically focused. Yes, they have a powerful military. There's no doubt. We're not going to take that away from them, but I can't see them risking it for the Russians.
No, I think
you're not getting anything back. There's no return on your investment in that one.
I'm reminded of what was the boxing promoter with the big hair, Don King.
Oh, Don King, yeah.
Right, Don King, after the Rumble in the Jungle in Zaire, right? He went to Zaire with George Foreman. And when the fight was over, and this was the rope-a-dope fight where Muhammad Ali got him to punch himself out and then knocked him out, right? When the fight was over, Ali got into his limo, and Don King jumped into the back of his limo. And somebody asked him about it later on, and he said, you came here with George Foreman, but you left with Muhammad Ali. And he said, you always jump in the limo with the winner. And I think Z would be like that, right?
Yeah,
he's gonna be able to read those tea leaves and see that NATO's not going to do well. I mean that Putin's not going to do well against NATO, and that will determine his course of action, because he is also a realpolitik practitioner and very pragmatic man. He's not an idealist in any way, and he has no love for Putin like Donald Trump thinks that Putin loves him. He has only love for China and what is good for China and himself, and that is what is going to make him act. And I just want to say this before I forget, that you have to give Putin an off-ramp and you have to give him a chance to save face, because again, if you back him into a corner, bad things can happen from there. And it's just allowing him to squeeze out of this thing at the end. That is the real sort of deft touch that you need here in international diplomacy. But NATO joining with Ukraine and what Ukraine has been able to do, especially of late, bombing oil refineries and things like that, it really does seem like the tide has turned in this war, finally.
I mean, and we've said this before, we cannot have a vacuum in Russia. We cannot leave Russia be a vacuum. And I agree, he has to be given an off-ramp. The problem is that with his incursions over airspace and now them, NATO basically saying we're not putting up with it anymore. We're not going to do it, and taking a page out of the Turks back in 2015. That could be difficult, because then we move out of diplomacy and we move into military action. So hopefully the Russians were listening to the Polish representative to the UN. Hopefully the Russians were listening to that Finnish ambassador that was speaking on behalf of the rest of the Nordic countries. And I hope, hopefully Russia is not really relying on the United States to back NATO off, because I don't even think we have any influence in NATO anymore. Not like we used to. I think they're looking at it, hey, we're on our own. They're across the pond, to hell with them. So hopefully we answered.
I think we could get that back though, Mark.
We could.
And I think that the turnaround here from Trump late yesterday, where he says Ukraine could, he's decided now, after being faced with I think a lot of more data, and the last person who talked to him is probably the one that wins this one, right? That just seems to be the way Trump works, is that Zelensky does have some cards. And when he said you have no cards, he was quite mistaken. And now it looks like Zelensky's got some cards, and he's gonna, at least stand aside and let him play him. I don't think we're getting as involved. I think NATO will help. NATO's going to buy the weaponry from the United States and deliver it to them. So Trump has an easy way to tell his boss, it's not me, boss. It's those other people.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully we answered that.
Yes. So thank you, Stephen, again. And thank you to all our listeners for spending some time with us on the Nova Society. And if you are not yet subscribed on the platform of your choice, please do so. Subscribing is free. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of NovaWorks, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.